Elia's ward sat alone in the dim glow of his small habitat, the wind of the iron storm rattling the metal walls outside. He had spent the better part of the day fixing the hydroponics system, ensuring the tiny garden that kept him alive would survive another storm. The lights flickered for a moment, and he cursed under his breath. Being alone on a frontier world was never easy, and nights like this made it worse. Every creak of the walls and howl of the wind felt like a warning, a reminder that he was truly alone. He sipped lukewarm water from a metal cup, staring out of the small viewport at the violent storm. The sky was a swirling mix of electric blue and green, a cosmic dance that could make even seasoned engineers uneasy. A flicker of lightning illuminated the landscape, revealing the jagged, frozen plains that stretched beyond the colony. Then came the knock. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it carried a weight that made Elias freeze. He set the cup down slowly, listening. There it was again, a measured tap at the door, deliberate and steady. His mind raced. Visitors were rare on this planet, almost unheard of in the middle of a storm, and yet instinct told him this was no casual traveler. He reached for the control panel beside the door and activated the viewer. The screen displayed a tall figure, unlike anything he had seen before. Her skin was pale silver, eyes deep with pain and exhaustion. Two smaller figures clung to her legs, children, their features strange and alien, but their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Elias blinked, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. The woman's voice was calm but firm as she spoke through the translator. "My children need a father. Will you help us?" The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of a plea that could not be ignored. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came. His logical mind argued with his instincts. Humans were not meant to intervene in the lives of alien species, not here, not now. And yet he felt a pull, a call he couldn't name. Another knock, firmer this time. The storm had grown louder, the wind tearing at the walls. He pressed the door release, the heavy panel sliding open with a hiss. The figure stepped inside, snow and ice melting instantly on the heated floor. She was taller than most humans, her movements graceful and controlled despite the obvious injuries on her arms and legs. The children followed, hesitating at the threshold but drawn by the warmth inside. Elias closed the door and engaged the locks. He took a step back, studying them. "Why here? Why me?" he asked finally, his voice rough from disuse. "My mate is dead," she replied simply. "Our clan has no mercy for widows. My children will die if I am not protected. Humans, you are different. You choose. That is why I am here." They were small, their limbs fragile, but there was a spark in their eyes, a hint of curiosity. One reached out a tiny hand, brushing against Elias' arm. He looked down and caught the gesture, then gave a small, hesitant nod. "Come inside," he said, the words heavier than he expected. "The storm, it will kill you out there." "I am Sarathi," she said quietly, "and these are my children, Kellen and Mara. We are not asking for friendship, only protection." Some acts of humanity defined who a person was, beyond rules and fear. He poured hot water into cups for them, handing one to each child. Kellen sniffed the steam, then sipped cautiously, while Mara clutched her cup as if it were a lifeline. Elias watched them, feeling a warmth he had not known in years. There was life here, fragile but resilient, and it reminded him why humans endured the harshest conditions in the galaxy. "The storm is bad," he said, trying to make conversation. "How long have you been traveling?" "Every step outside the colony could have been our last." She looked at her children, and Elias saw a flicker of sorrow that made his chest tighten. They were survivors, but only barely. He realized that her words were not a request for aid alone. They were a challenge, a test of whether he would rise to the level of humanity he had always admired in others. Humans were remarkable not because they were the strongest, but because they acted when no one else would, because they chose responsibility over convenience. Elias checked the habitat's sensors and noticed subtle anomalies, signs of small craft tracking this area, likely sent by Sarathi's clan. They could be dangerous, but he would not let them take these children, not while he was here. "Stay here tonight," he said. "We'll figure the rest out in the morning. You're safe inside." They did not wait for the universe to hand them a solution. They acted against the odds. He watched the storm through the viewport as the hours passed. The wind tore across the frozen plains, lightning painting the sky in violent streaks. But inside there was warmth, life, and a fragile peace. Elias made a silent promise to himself. These beings, though alien, would not face the universe alone. He would teach them what humans knew best, how to survive, adapt, and most importantly, choose. Night fell and the storm raged on. Elias sat with the children, telling them stories of human ingenuity and courage, of engineers who had survived worlds worse than this. They listened with wide eyes, their fear slowly giving way to curiosity and wonder. Sarathi rested, her gaze distant but focused, as if calculating the next steps for survival. By dawn, the storm had eased slightly. The first faint light of the twin suns peeked through the clouds, illuminating the icy plains outside. Elias knew the journey ahead would be long and fraught with danger. Others would come, some seeking to challenge him, some to take Sarathi and her children back. And yet he did not fear them. Humans had a way of facing impossible odds and prevailing. That was their nature. That was what made them dangerous in a galaxy full of predators. Elias stood by the viewport, watching the horizon. Sarathi approached him quietly. "You chose to help us," she said, her voice softer than before. "I did not expect this." It had begun a bond, fragile yet unbreakable, forged not by law or tradition, but by choice. As the twin suns rose fully over the icy horizon, Elias felt a rare, steady calm. The storm would return. Challenges would come. But for the first time in years, he was not truly alone. And that, he knew, was enough to face whatever the universe had planned next. The morning after the storm was calm, almost deceptive in its serenity. The icy plains beyond the colony glistened under the pale twin suns, and the wind carried only the faintest whispers of what had raged the night before. Inside his habitat, Elias moved quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping figures on the makeshift bedding he had arranged. Sarathi and her children had huddled together, exhausted but alive. Seeing them there, Elias felt a strange mix of pride and responsibility. This was not a rescue for glory or reward. It was simply what a human did when confronted with the need to protect. He went to the small hydroponics garden, tending to the fragile plants that sustained him. His hands moved with practiced precision, though his mind wandered to the visitors he now sheltered. Kellen and Mara stirred in their sleep, soft breaths audible in the otherwise silent room. Sarathi's presence was quiet but commanding, her breathing steady, even in rest. Elias admired the way she held herself, warrior and mother, alien and vulnerable at once. She had faced death to reach him, and he could not ignore that courage. Breakfast was simple, rehydrated protein packs and boiled water. Elias offered portions to the children, who eyed the strange food warily. Mara, the younger, poked at her pack with a tiny finger. Kellen, more cautious, watched Elias closely, as if measuring whether he was trustworthy. Elias smiled faintly. Humans were not always perfect in their methods, but they were relentless in their intent to help when it mattered. That was a lesson he intended to teach them. "Eat," he said, placing a cup of hot water in front of each child. "It's not fancy, but it will keep you alive." He showed them how to regulate the habitat's temperature, how to operate the water purifier, and how to handle emergency communications. The children were quick to learn, their alien physiology giving them an edge in understanding some of the more complex machinery. Kellen's fingers moved deftly over the controls, while Mara observed intently, absorbing each instruction silently. Elias felt a surge of satisfaction. Teaching them was not just survival, it was shaping the next step in a fragile, interconnected future. The morning passed, and the children's laughter began to fill the small space, tentative but genuine. Sarathi allowed herself a rare smile, seeing her children reclaim a piece of childhood she had feared lost forever. Elias watched, heart quietly swelling. Humans survived not because they were the strongest, but because they nurtured life in the darkest moments. That ability to act with care, to create warmth in an indifferent universe, defined them in ways many species failed to comprehend. Midday brought the first external challenge. A communication alert flashed on Elias' panel. Unknown craft had entered the outer system, scanning the colony with methodical precision. His instincts kicked in immediately. The Sarathi clan would not have let him shelter the widow and her children without notice. These arrivals were searching, and they were likely dangerous. "Stay inside," Elias instructed firmly, locking the habitat's outer doors. "Do not answer if they knock." "No one leaves." Elias monitored the sensors constantly, noting each movement, calculating every risk. The children, sensing tension, clung to Sarathi's legs. She reassured them in whispers, her hands firm on their shoulders. Elias admired the balance she struck, warrior instincts tempered by maternal care. Humans had instinct, too, he reflected, but they combined it with choice, with strategy. That was why they endured when others faltered. The situation escalated when a warning signal came from the colony's central administration. Local authorities had detected unusual life forms in Elia's habitat. Protocol demanded immediate reporting, and failure to comply could result in legal consequences, or worse, intervention by security forces. Elias weighed his options. Retreating would mean handing over Sarathi and the children to a clan that saw widows and offspring as expendable. He refused to consider it. He transmitted a message, an official declaration that he had assumed temporary guardianship of the aliens, citing human protection laws that allowed cross-species shelter under extraordinary circumstances. The response was swift. Administrative officers questioned his authority, but the legal reference forced hesitation. Humans, it seemed, were unpredictable in their insistence on morality and law. Sarathi watched the process silently, her expression unreadable. Yet Elias could sense a shift. She began to see humans not merely as survivors, but as beings capable of creating systems that valued life beyond strength and dominance. Her people measured worth in battle and lineage, but humans measured worth in choices, in action, in the willingness to protect. That subtle but profound difference was already altering her perspective. The children, meanwhile, adapted to the human routines. Kellen learned to operate the airlocks, fascinated by the control panels. Mara took to the water system, marveling at the simplicity and efficiency of human engineering. Elias guided them patiently, correcting mistakes gently. Laughter and curiosity replaced fear, and the atmosphere, once tense, grew cautiously warm. By evening, Elias prepared a modest dinner. Rehydrated food was mundane, but he added spices and water, turning it into something edible and comforting. Sarathi tasted the meal, her expression softening in a way Elias had not expected. "Your people find ways to make survival pleasant," she observed. There was a quiet admiration in her voice, the kind that recognized a deeper strength not visible in outward combat. Outside, the storm had passed completely, leaving a stark clarity over the colony. Yet the danger had not disappeared. Patrol ships continued scanning, a reminder that the clan's reach extended far and wide. Elias knew the coming days would test not only his technical skill but his endurance, his ability to act decisively, and his willingness to defend those who could not defend themselves. This was human work, unglamorous, necessary, and relentless. That night after the children had fallen asleep, Sarathi approached Elias. "You risk much by sheltering us," she said softly. "The clan will not stop, and your people—" She paused, considering her words. "Your people are dangerous when they choose to act. Not because we are strongest or smartest or fastest. We act when it matters, that is all." Elias taught the children more about survival, how to maintain the habitat, how to analyze sensor data, and how to respond to emergencies. He instilled in them a sense of responsibility, not as a command, but as a natural extension of their presence in his care. Kellen and Mara began to trust him fully, calling him by name in their own language, a simple yet profound acknowledgement of the bond forming between them. Rumors began to circulate through the colony. Neighbors whispered about the humans sheltering alien life forms. Some were curious, others suspicious. The local alien authorities demanded explanations, questioning his motives and judgment. Elias responded with clarity and firmness, citing human law and moral duty. His unwavering stance caused surprise and even respect among some observers. Humans, it seemed, could not be coerced into fear or submission when the lives of innocents were at stake. Sarathi observed these interactions silently, a mixture of wariness and understanding in her eyes. She realized that humans did not operate by the same rules as her people. Their strength was not measured in combat alone, but in resolve, intellect, and the courage to act in the face of danger. She began to see that the very survival of her children might depend less on force and more on the principles Elias embodied. As the week progressed, the children grew more comfortable, exploring the habitat, asking questions, and learning to manipulate human tools. Elias found himself teaching not only survival skills but values, patience, observation, and the importance of choice. The children responded with surprising speed, demonstrating an adaptability that would have impressed even the most seasoned human educators. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the icy plains, Elias stood at the viewport, watching the lights of distant patrol ships flicker. The children slept peacefully in the warmth of the habitat, and Sarathi rested beside them, her form relaxed in a way that suggested trust. Elias allowed himself a quiet moment of satisfaction. Humans did not merely survive storms and wars. They created pockets of life, warmth, and hope in the coldest corners of the universe. That was a power all its own, a power he wielded simply by choosing to act. The night passed without incident, but Elias knew the calm was temporary. The clan would not abandon its search. Challenges were coming, and the colony's fragile peace would be tested. Yet he did not fear what was to come. Humans faced the impossible regularly, and they endured. That endurance was a quiet, formidable strength, often underestimated by other species. Elias had no illusions about the risks ahead, but he knew one truth above all: protecting life, chosen life, was a human duty, and he would not fail. Sarathi awoke before dawn and observed Elias tending to the habitat systems. "You are relentless," she said quietly. "I do what must be done," he replied. "It is what humans do." In that truth he found strength, and in the small, alien faces that now trusted him he found reason. The storm had passed, but the real challenges were only beginning. Still, Elias knew that together, human and alien, they would face whatever came next. Survival was more than endurance, it was choice. And humans, he realized, would always choose to protect. The days after the storm had brought a fragile routine to the small habitat. Elia's ward had grown accustomed to the presence of Sarathi and her children, and in turn they had begun to trust him in ways few outsiders ever did. Yet the quiet was deceptive. Beyond the icy plains, shadows of danger loomed. It started with faint signals on the habitat sensors, small craft moving at high speed scanning the colony perimeter. Elias frowned, recognizing the patterns immediately. These were not random patrols. They were trackers, scouts sent by the same clan Sarathi had fled. His heart sank briefly, but then he straightened. Humans were not known for cowering in the face of impossible odds. They faced threats because survival was more than endurance, it was choice, and action was always the first step. He called the children to the central room, keeping the mood calm. Kellen and Mara looked up at him with wide, questioning eyes. Elias knelt to meet their gaze. "Listen carefully," he said. "You must stay inside no matter what. You will not open the doors. You will not answer anyone. Do you understand? That is what humans do." Humans did not rely solely on power. They relied on the will to act, and that will could shape outcomes far more effectively than brute force. By evening, the scouts had begun to probe closer, testing defenses. Elias knew it was only a matter of time before direct confrontation became inevitable. He activated the habitat's automated defense grid, systems he had retrofitted from old mining equipment. Lights flickered along the walls, sensors scanned constantly, and the children observed in silence. He was teaching them a lesson without words. Survival required foresight, ingenuity, and courage. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the viewport. Elias recognized the formation immediately, 3 ships, sleek and angular, descending toward the colony. He swore under his breath. "They're here," he said. Sarathi stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on his arm. "We have no weapons, only your humans' resolve. Then we use what we have." "Listen," he said into the calm. "I am sheltering an alien widow and her children. They are under my protection. Do not engage unless I order it." The children watched from behind reinforced panels. Kellen whispered, "Will they hurt us?" Elias was proving it now, with patience and cleverness rather than weapons alone. He initiated the habitat's defense sequence. Automated turrets moved into position, not to kill, but to deter and protect. Sensors monitored heat signatures, movement, and distance. He had prepared for years, though never expecting to deploy the systems in defense of alien children. Yet the principles were the same: observe, plan, act. That was human methodology, and it was terrifying in its precision. The clan members advanced cautiously, unaware of the traps awaiting them. Elias activated an electromagnetic pulse to disable their communications, buying time. The children gasped, not fully understanding the mechanics, but sensing the shift in energy. Saratha's eyes widened with recognition. Humans used intellect as a weapon, and when applied with courage, it was just as formidable as brute force. One of the intruders moved closer, scanning the habitat exterior. Elias triggered a defensive net, designed to capture rather than harm. It ensnared the alien, leaving him dangling helplessly. Kellen and Mara pressed closer to Sarathi, who could not hide her astonishment. Elias was showing them a principle far deeper than combat: humans protected through strategy, foresight, and choice. Hours of tense observation passed. The clan members, realizing the human was prepared and cunning, retreated temporarily. Elias allowed himself a brief sigh, but the relief was fleeting. The threat was not gone, it would return. And when it did, he knew the stakes would be higher. At night, he gathered the children around him. "You see," he said, "survival is not just about strength. It is about knowing what to do and acting without hesitation. Humans do this every day in ways others might never see. So humans can win without fighting. You act." The following morning, the colony's administrative council arrived to assess the situation. They had been alerted by the scouts' retreat, curious and cautious. Elias met them with calm authority. "I am sheltering aliens in need of protection," he stated plainly. "They are under my guardianship, and their safety is my responsibility. I will act to protect them." Meanwhile, the children adapted further to human life. They learned to operate emergency systems, understand environmental controls, and even navigate the colony's limited terrain. Elias supervised patiently, correcting errors without anger, instilling confidence and resilience. Sarathi observed, her admiration growing. Humans, she realized, did not rely solely on instinct or physical power. Their strength came from intellect, perseverance, and moral clarity. By midday, a new threat emerged. A small strike team from the clan had returned, attempting to flank the habitat. Elias detected them instantly and activated a series of defenses designed to mislead and deter. The aliens advanced cautiously, wary now of the humans' ingenuity. Elias deployed decoy signals, rerouted communications, and adjusted environmental controls to create confusion. The children watched, fascinated and increasingly confident. They began to understand that courage and preparation could be more powerful than brute force. Sarathi finally spoke aloud, her voice a mixture of awe and respect. "I see now," she said, "why humans survive where others fail. You do not rely solely on strength. You choose, you plan, you act with purpose. That is formidable." They had underestimated the human, assuming he would be easy prey. They had miscalculated. Elias had demonstrated a principle many species failed to grasp. Humans were relentless not because they sought dominance, but because they acted when others would not. As night fell, the children slept soundly, exhausted from the day's lessons and tension. Sarathi rested beside them, her mind racing with new understanding. Elias stood at the viewport, watching the stars above the icy plains. The clan would return, he knew. Threats would continue and dangers unseen would rise, but he felt no fear. Humans endured, adapted, and chose action in ways that made them formidable. That was the HFY truth, and he embodied it fully in the shelter he provided. Before retiring for the night, Elias walked to the small workbench and adjusted a few sensors, preparing for whatever might come next. Sarathi followed him silently, watching. "You are remarkable," she said. Elias smiled faintly. "I am human," he replied. "That is enough." Inside, life thrived, fragile, alien, and human all at once. Elias had shown Kellen and Mara that courage was not about aggression, but about protection and choice. He had shown Sarathi that humans were not merely survivors, but moral actors in a universe that often lacked morality. And in that, he knew they were safe, for now. The clan's retreat was temporary. More challenges would come. But Elias Ward would face them as humans always did. With resolve, with intellect, and with the unshakable choice to protect life, no matter the odds. The days that followed were tense but productive. Elias had settled into a rhythm that balanced survival, education, and vigilance. Sarathi and her children had grown more comfortable within the walls of the habitat, yet the shadow of the clan lingered over them. The scouts had retreated, but it was clear they would return, perhaps with reinforcements, perhaps with demands. Elias understood that protection alone was not enough. He needed strategy, foresight, and the subtle power of human diplomacy. Elias began documenting everything: movements of the clan, environmental conditions, and the daily growth of the children. Each note, each measurement served a purpose. Humans survived because they prepared, even in the face of uncertainty. Preparation was not fear, it was choice. And choice, he had learned, could be more powerful than weapons. One morning, a communication arrived from the colony's central administration. A neutral envoy, human and alien representatives, requested a meeting. The council had been monitoring Elias' activities and the presence of the alien widow and children. The envoy's tone was cautious, curious, and slightly disapproving. Elias knew that diplomacy was a different kind of battlefield. Strength was necessary, but intellect and clarity were equally vital. He prepared the habitat's conference system and positioned Sarathi and the children behind him, their presence silent but undeniable. The envoy appeared on the screen, composed and professional. "Elias Ward," the lead representative said, We have observed your actions. Shelter of non-human life forms is unusual, especially from a species with a history of conflict. Explain your motives. Other humans may choose to interfere in alien affairs. This could be considered political overreach. Even the alien members of the envoy seemed surprised by the clarity and confidence in his words. Humans, they realized, were not predictable. Their sense of duty was not dictated by strength, hierarchy, or intimidation. They acted because they chose to act. That choice made them formidable. Meanwhile, the children observed, wide-eyed, learning from Elias' resolve. Kellen whispered to Mara, "He is not afraid of them." Mara nodded silently, absorbing the lesson that courage was measured not in muscle or weaponry, but in action guided by purpose. Sarathi watched, understanding for the first time that human strength was not only physical, it was moral, intellectual, and deeply persistent. After the meeting, the envoy left with cautious approval. Elias had won not through confrontation, but through reasoning and demonstration of principle. The clan, he knew, would be watching, and humans, by nature, were unpredictable and relentless when protecting those they had chosen to defend. That evening, he gathered Sarathi and the children. "They have agreed to let you stay," he said, "but they will be watching. We must continue to prepare, and you must learn to adapt. Humans survive because we adapt faster than the universe changes. My children may live because of it." Kellen and Mara absorbed each lesson eagerly, their alien minds quick to grasp complex concepts. Elias also worked with Sarathi to teach her the human approach to problem-solving. She had been a warrior, trained for physical confrontation and instinctive decisions, but Elias showed her the subtle power of strategy, patience, and preemptive action. She began to understand that humans could wield influence without violence, and that the survival of her children depended on adopting these principles. Word of the situation spread quietly through the colony. Some were skeptical, questioning Elias' judgment, but others observed with growing respect. Humans were known to act decisively and morally, often in ways that startled and impressed neighboring species. Elias had shown that protecting life required intelligence, patience, and courage, a combination many underestimated. One afternoon, the sensors detected unusual activity beyond the colony perimeter. A fleet of ships, larger and more organized than the scouts before, approached cautiously. Elias knew this was the clan returning in force, likely with the intent to assert dominance. He did not panic. Panic, he had learned, was a luxury for those who lacked preparation. He convened a brief council with Sarathi and the children. "They are coming back," he said calmly. "We must be ready. Observe, learn, and follow instructions. This is a test, not only of survival but of understanding. Courage is necessary, but clarity is your weapon. Because humans act when it matters, not when humans choose to act first." Elias had demonstrated a truth many failed to grasp. Humans were not merely strong, they were relentless in their commitment to moral action. The night passed in tense observation. Sensors tracked every movement, every signal. The children slept fitfully, but with a growing sense of safety. Sarathi remained alert, yet there was a new respect in her eyes for Elias and his species. Humans, she realized, did not require fear to enforce their protection. Their choice to act was its own deterrent. The next morning, the clan withdrew temporarily, likely to reassess strategy. Elias seized the opportunity to strengthen alliances within the colony. He reached out to other human settlers and sympathetic alien observers, sharing knowledge, building trust, and demonstrating that protection of life was a shared value. Humans, he knew, were not just survivors. They were influencers, capable of shaping perspectives and inspiring courage across species. Sarathi watched quietly, noting how humans extended influence not through domination, but through principles and action. She began to understand the deeper lesson Elias was teaching. Life, trust, and choice could be more formidable than any weapon. Her children began calling him by name without hesitation, a simple acknowledgement of the bond that had formed. Weeks passed, and the colony slowly adjusted to the presence of the alien family under Elias' protection. The clan's attempts to assert control were thwarted repeatedly, not through combat alone, but through preparation, legal clarity, and unwavering moral stance. Humans, Elias reflected, were often underestimated because their strength was subtle yet pervasive, a combination of intellect, resilience, and ethical action. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Sarathi approached Elias. "You have shown me a new way," she said softly. My children may never understand fully why your people endure. But I see now that your strength is not in weapons alone. It is in choice, in the courage to act when no one else will. They had learned lessons far beyond simple survival, lessons of courage, trust, and human determination. Sarathi watched them, feeling a cautious hope she had not experienced since the death of her mate. Elias stood at the viewport, observing the distant horizon. The clan would return, and the universe was vast and indifferent, filled with dangers and challenges. Yet humans thrived not because the universe was kind, but because they acted decisively when it was not. He had taught the children this principle without words, through example and unwavering commitment. That night the habitat was calm. The twin suns had set, leaving the frozen plains bathed in starlight. Elias prepared sensors, maintained defenses, and checked systems with quiet precision. Sarathi and the children slept nearby, their trust in him growing with every hour. Humans, he realized, were not merely survivors. They were the backbone of hope in a galaxy that often lacked it. Their choices defined them, and their actions reshaped the world around them. Sarathi approached him one final time before resting. "Your people are extraordinary," she whispered. "You survive not because the universe favors you, but because you act when it does not." The bond forged between human and alien was not born of tradition, obligation, or instinct alone. It was born of choice. And in that choice lay a quiet, unstoppable strength that would shape the future of the colony and the lives of the children in ways no one could predict. The clan's shadow still lingered, but Elias knew the truth that would guide them all. Humans acted when others hesitated, chose when others fled, and endured when others gave up. That was not only survival, it was humanity at its finest. And Sarathi and her children were learning that lesson in the safest place they could be, under the protection of a human who understood the power of choice. The horizon was quiet that morning, the icy plains stretching endlessly under the pale light of the twin suns. Elias Ward stood at the viewport, watching the distant shimmer of the clan's retreating ships. They had tried to assert control, tested his resolve, and failed. The human's choice to protect life had proven more formidable than threats, diplomacy, or intimidation. He allowed himself a small, satisfied sigh. The storm of danger had passed, at least for now. Inside the habitat, Sarathi and her children moved about with a growing sense of ease. Kellen and Mara had mastered many of the survival skills Elias had taught them, from monitoring sensors to operating life support systems. They laughed as they ran across the small room, their alien features animated with joy. Sarathi watched them quietly, a mixture of relief and pride in her eyes. For the first time since her mate's death, she felt hope not just for herself but for her children's future. Elias approached her gently. "They are strong," he said. "They are learning, adapting, they will survive." That is not something my people understand easily. Sarathi worked alongside them, learning the human approach to problem-solving. It was methodical, deliberate, and surprisingly effective. Aliens who relied solely on instinct or strength could not grasp the power of patience and strategy, but Sarathi was beginning to understand. As afternoon approached, a message arrived from the colony's council. Human and alien diplomats had convened a formal agreement, recognizing Sarathi and her children as protected under human jurisdiction. Threats of retaliation from the clan were acknowledged, but officially deterred. The council praised Elias' actions, not only for courage but for clarity and adherence to principle. Humans were unpredictable in their devotion to morality, and the council had witnessed it firsthand. Elias explained the situation to Sarathi. "The council has recognized your status. The clan cannot interfere without consequence. You and your children are safe. Yet here it is, offered by someone I barely knew. You are extraordinary." Kellen and Mara explored their new environment, confident and curious. Sarathi taught them lessons in culture, language, and heritage, while Elias supplemented with human knowledge, engineering, and strategy. Together, they created a blended space where alien and human practices coexisted in harmony. Word of their success spread quietly. Neighboring settlers and species began to take note. Humans were not only capable of survival, they were capable of shaping outcomes through moral courage and deliberate action. The HFY principle was clear. Humans defended life not because they were asked, but because they chose to. The galaxy was beginning to recognize a species that valued choice, protection, and endurance above mere power. One evening, as the twin suns set in a quiet, golden glow, Sarathi approached Elias. "My children call you father. she said softly. I cannot explain fully what that means in your culture, but they do. I accept it. That is what makes a family. The nights that followed were peaceful. Kellen and Mara slept soundly, knowing they were safe. Sarathi rested nearby, her mind free for the first time in months. Elias maintained his routines, monitoring the habitat, checking sensors, and ensuring that any potential threats were neutralized before they could approach. Humans thrived on vigilance and preparation. It was their strength, and it was quietly formidable. Then came the day when the clan made a final approach, not in anger but in observation. They hovered at the edge of the colony, testing boundaries and legality. Elias did not panic. He activated communication channels and invited the lead member to speak. You are human, the alien said, cautious and formal. You shelter what should not be sheltered. Why? Finally, they withdrew, leaving the colony's perimeter and leaving Elias and the family in peace. Humans had won, not by dominance, but by the strength of principle and action. That principle, the choice to act when others hesitate, was what set humans apart across the galaxy. Sarathi turned to Elias as the fleet disappeared into the distance. Your people, they are dangerous in ways I did not understand before. Not in violence, but in persistence, in morality. I see now why your species survives. Kellen and Mara grew stronger, learning both alien and human lessons. They explored beyond the walls safely, guided by Elias' careful instructions. Sarathi continued to observe and teach, now fully embracing the lessons of human strategy and moral courage. The colony around them shifted as well. Observers from other species began to see humans differently, not merely as survivors, but as active participants in the shaping of morality, law, and protection across worlds. The reputation of humanity as guardians, protectors, and relentless actors grew quietly but firmly. One evening, Elias sat with Sarathi by the viewport, the children playing quietly in the background. Do you understand now, he asked, why humans are feared and respected across the stars? And in that, humans are unstoppable. One step at a time, carefully, and with determination. They had learned what it meant to be protected by humans and to trust in them completely. Sarathi placed a hand on Elias' shoulder. You have not only saved my children, you have changed their world. You have changed mine. Perhaps you have even changed me. And sometimes, others learn from what they see. That endurance was the foundation of hope, protection, and life itself. For the first time in months, Sarathi allowed herself to relax completely. The children slept peacefully. Elias maintained his routines, quiet and vigilant, yet confident. They were safe, and they would continue to be safe because he, a human, had chosen it. And that choice, simple yet profound, echoed across the colony, across the icy plains, and across the galaxy itself. Humans protect life not because they are commanded, not because they fear, but because they choose. That was the quiet, unstoppable power of humanity, and it had created a new family, a new hope, and a future worth defending. Elias watched the stars long into the night. Somewhere out there, civilizations would learn, adapt, and respect what humans had done. Not because of strength alone, but because humans chose to act, even when impossible odds pressed down upon them. In that, the HFY truth shone brightly. Humanity endured, protected, and prevailed. Sarathi stirred beside him, whispering, My children are safe, and I am grateful. Truly grateful. Humanity, in its relentless courage and moral clarity, had triumphed, not through conquest, but through protection and through the power of choice.